and his own little mirror to look at himself. His owner, Mrs. McLemore, loved to hear Chippy sing all day. But Mrs. McLemore was also a very busy lady who got easily distracted. One day, as she was freshening up Chippy's cage with the vacuum attachment, the phone rang. And trying to do too many things at once, Mrs. McLemore continued to vacuum with her left hand as she reached for the phone with her right. Suddenly, shroop, a flash of yellow and green feathers flew in the air. Chippy was gone. He got sucked down by the vacuum. Panicked, Mrs. McLemore ripped open the vacuum cleaner bag and began digging through all the dirt, lint, hair, and soot. Luckily, Chippy was alive, but minus most of his feathers. So Mrs. McLemore grabbed Chippy out of the sweeper bag and ran to the bathroom. She turned on the sink faucet and plunged Chippy under the cold water. Well, that got off most of the dust and dirt, but now poor Chippy was dripping wet and freezing. So Mrs. McLemore grabbed her hairdryer, turned it to high, and blasted Chippy with hot air and awful noises. After a few minutes of drying and fluffing, the parakeet looked almost as good as new. A couple of weeks later, Mrs. McLemore's neighbor came by for tea and heard the whole tragic tale of what happened to poor little Chippy. The neighbor asked, "That's amazing, but how is he now?" "Oh, he's fine," Mrs. McLemore said. "Of course, he doesn't sing anymore. He just kind of sits there and stares at me." Can you relate? Life has a way of doing that to us sometimes. There are days when we absolutely feel like Chippy, dazed, manhandled, put through the ringer. Problems seem to compound. Rough things happen to us out of the blue, and soon we don't feel much like singing anymore, just like Chippy. The Bible confirms the challenging nature of life all throughout its pages. Just think of the book of Job, to give but one example, which says in chapter 19, "O God, my relatives and close friends have failed me. The serving girls in my house don't listen to me. My breath is repulsive to my wife, and even young children despise me and walk away. I have become an alien in everyone's eyes." A popular saying is, when life hands you lemons, what do? Make lemonade. Of course, I've also heard it said that unless life hands you some sugar and water to go along with it, good luck with that lemonade. Everyone gets lemons handed to them at one time or another. Something sour, or bitter, or unfair. Something that threatens to steal our peace. Something that upsets our way of looking at the world. You can't escape it. One of the first metaphors I remember hearing as a kid was the word lemon. I knew all about the yellow fruit, of course, but what did it mean when the car dealership down the street from where I lived in Plainfield put up a big banner that said, "We won't sell you a lemon"? I had to ask my father what that meant. In the Bible, the story of Ruth and Naomi is a model for people who wonder what to do when life hands you lemons. The book of Ruth is one of the oldest and shortest books of the Old Testament, stuck between Judges and 1 Samuel. It's a book almost easy to skip because it's so brief, but reading it is quite worthwhile. It's like exploring the desperate housewives of the Bible. Naomi is a foreign national whose gloomy life is surrounded by death. She's an Israelite living in the country of Moab because of a famine in that country, in her homeland. First, her husband dies. Then, her 2 sons die. Her one son, Mahlon's name in Hebrew means sickly. And the other son's name, Chilion, means weakening. So you know right off the bat, this woman's in trouble. Not good signs with names like that. Both boys, before they died, had married local girls. Their names were Orpah and Ruth. So in a short span of time, Naomi is not only a widow, but left with 2 relatively unknown daughters-in-law. She is truly a stranger in a strange land. Like Job hundreds of years before her, she probably feels the whole world has turned on her, is crushing down. Well, after living in Moab a while longer, she hears that conditions are better in her hometown. So she sets out to return to Bethlehem in the land of Judah. Now, the custom of the day was for you to stick with your family unit, even after death. But Naomi's idea was to release her daughters-in-law from this burden. She tells them to return to their homes and start new lives back in Moab, where they live. And the one daughter-in-law, Orpah, listens and goes home. But Ruth, whom the biblical book is named after, insists she will cast her lot with Naomi. In some of the most beautiful language about commitment we have, Ruth tells her mother-in-law, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, there too I will be buried. May the Lord do thus for me, and more as well, even if death parts our ways." Well, after hearing that, Naomi lets Ruth continue with her. When the 2 women arrive back in Judah, the people are astounded to see Naomi again. It's like a 20-year class reunion. But life has been tough on the old girl. She even says to her friends, "Hey, don't call me Naomi anymore," which in Hebrew means pleasant or a delight. She says, "Instead, call me Mara," because in Hebrew that means the bitter one. Now, if the story ended here, we could make a case for being miserable wretches all our lives. This story could be our example of the suffering nature of life. It would be okay to wallow in self-pity and doubt when life is so cruel and unfair. The moral of the story would be, once life hands you lemons, there's nothing you can do about it. But thankfully, that's not the message. The story doesn't end there. Through a remarkable sequence of events, Ruth meets a man named Boaz, who is himself a distant relative of Naomi. And that makes Boaz eligible to be Ruth's kinsman redeemer, meaning someone in the extended family who will look after her in place of her former husband. By the end of the book, Boaz marries Ruth, and the 2 of them have a child together who turns out to be the future grandfather of King David and ultimately an ancestor of Jesus. In other words, someone pretty important. Now, there's a lot we can analyze here. Suffice to say that just over and ending in tragedy or bad news, God can write a new ending. And it's really not an ending at all, but a new beginning. Let God dictate our beginnings and endings. For us today, I believe the issue is the way in which we choose to look at life's events, in all its glories and all its downers. It's how we will handle the tragedies and lemons that life inevitably hands us. No doubt God would tell us, yes, it's okay to be sad, but it's not okay to feel hopeless. Yes, it's okay to take a breather when you're down, but it's not okay to lose faith. Consider the Apostle Paul's verdict from 2 Corinthians 4. He says, "We are afflicted in every way, but never crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are persecuted, but not forsaken. We are struck down, but not destroyed." Paul refers to the love of Jesus Christ as a treasure kept in a clay jar, something always at arm's reach. And what a great image in ancient terminology. In 2014, I would say that we have a treasure that we can keep right in our back pockets, something to carry with us at all times, available for us to take out whenever we need it. But it's something that's always there. Paul says this treasure is our help in the present and our hope for the future. That it guides us and uplifts us in all the important matters of grace, forgiveness, mercy, righteousness, justice. The Bible reminds us that when we are stuck in this down and out cycle, when we want to change our name to bitter fruit, when we feel forsaken or forgotten, when we don't feel like singing anymore, that it's only a matter of time before God brings around that sugar and water and makes those sour lemons taste a whole lot better. And one other lemony angle I want to present to you. Aren't we so good in disguising ourselves, at hiding our troubles in front of others? When a problem springs up, so many people retreat deep inside of themselves. They conceal themselves. And this also brings to mind lemons. The lemon tree produces a lovely white blossom every spring. It's called the lemon verbena. And it's delightful as a tea or to add to a dessert like ice cream. But as the song by Peter, Paul, and Mary says, lemon tree very pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat. Who out there hasn't had the experience of asking someone whether or not they're doing okay or if there's anything bothering them, and they respond, "Oh, I'm fine." When we know in such cases, clearly they are not fine. It's because we have a tendency to retreat into ourselves because we think we're going to make matters worse. We're like that lemon tree, which shows off such lovely flowers to the outside, but when you bite into the actual fruit, it's bitter. And maybe we feel worthless, rejected, not understood or listened to. But the Bible has a few words for us. Isaiah 41 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not anxiously look about you, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." And Philippians 4 adds, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, shall guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Friends, whether we wear our hurt on our sleeves and cry out in public, or if we bury it deep below the surface so that others will never see,